I swept into the courtroom, the black robe feeling like a second skin and armor I'd worn for decades. The air in the room always changes when I enter. It's not magic, it's an expectation of order of truth. My eyes did a quick scan. On the plaintiff's side, a woman probably mid-40s, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. She looked terrified but determined. I can work with that. On the defendant's side, well. What do we have here? A man in a sheriff's uniform sitting with an air of smug superiority that instantly set my teeth on edge. He had a chest puffed out with unearned pride and a small, condescending smirk playing on his lips. He thinks the uniform is a shield. In my courtroom, it's a target. I sat the thud of my chair echoing slightly. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I picked up the case file, my eyes darting over the names. Plaintiff is Miss Arlene Gable. Defendant is Sheriff Raymond Brody. I looked up, pinning him with my gaze. The smirk didn't vanish. Big mistake. Miss Gable, you are suing Sheriff Brody for $5,000 for what you claim is illegal seizure and harassment. Is that correct? She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, Your Honor. He took the money from my diner. He called it a donation to the Sheriff's Community Safety Fund. A donation, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a bad smell. I turned my full attention to the sheriff. Sheriff Brody, you're a public servant. Is it now part of your job description to solicit donations from local business owners? He chuckled, a soft, arrogant little sound. Your Honor, with all due respect, Miss Gable is mischaracterizing a voluntary community program. We protect our local businesses, and many of them are happy to show their appreciation. Happy. I cut him off, my voice like ice. She doesn't look happy. She looks like she's about to be sick. And I've found that most people don't sue over things that make them happy. I leaned forward, my focus narrowing on him. Let me make something perfectly clear, sir. The moment you walked into this room, you stopped being Sheriff Brody. You are a defendant. Your title means nothing here. The only authority in this room is me. Do you understand? His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Now, Miss Gable, you say he took the money. Explain that to me. Did he put a gun to your head? No, Your Honor, she said, taking a shaky breath. But it was understood. He and his deputy would come in every month on the first Friday. They'd sit at a table, order coffee, and just watch. My customers would get nervous and leave. He'd talk about how dangerous the neighborhood was getting, how a place like mine could be a target for break-ins. Then he'd mention the fund and how businesses that contribute seem to have fewer problems. My eyes didn't leave Brody's face. He was listening with a look of detached amusement, as if hearing a child's tall tale. He was an actor, and a bad one at that. He thought his performance was convincing. To me, it was transparent as glass. This wasn't a lawman. This was a thug with a badge, a common shakedown artist. So you're saying he intimidated you into paying? I asked Miss Gable. Yes. Every month. $250. For almost 2 years. The last time I told him I couldn't afford it, business was slow. He just smiled that smile he has now. And he said, that's a shame, a real shame. You know, health code inspections can be a real nuisance. The very next day, a health inspector showed up and found 3 minor violations that cost me a fortune to fix and nearly got me shut down. I turned back to Brody. The smirk was back full force. A coincidence, I presume, Sheriff? I have no control over the health department, Your Honor, he said smoothly. I'm a public servant, not a wizard. My only concern is the safety of my community. Your concern is lining your pockets, I shot back. Don't insult my intelligence. It's the one thing I'm very, very sensitive about. I looked at Miss Gable's paperwork. You have a record of these payments. Yes, Your Honor. She pushed a small, worn ledger forward. I noted every single one, the date, the amount, and who I gave it to. It always says Brody or Deputy Miller. I had Bird, my bailiff, retrieve the ledger. I flipped through the pages. It was meticulous, simple, clean, and damning. I held it up. Sheriff, here, we have a ledger detailing 22 payments of $250, all marked with your name. What do you have to say about this? He laughed, an actual out-loud laugh. The entire courtroom fell silent. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with what he thought was cleverness. Your Honor, really, a little notebook with some scribbles in it, that's her proof. I could write a notebook right now saying you owe me $1 million. Does that make it true? He leaned back, crossing his arms. This is a waste of your time and the taxpayers' money. I placed the ledger down gently on my desk. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. I let the silence stretch, letting him stew in his own arrogance. He thought he'd scored a point. He thought he was smarter than the evidence, smarter than the plaintiff, and most of all, smarter than me. My internal monologue was simple. This fool just handed me the shovel to bury him with. I looked at him, a cold, thin smile forming on my own lips. Sir, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, you mock her evidence. You mock this court. And you think you're going to walk out of here and go back to terrorizing your town. I paused, letting my words sink in. You have just made the single biggest miscalculation of your life. His laughter died in his throat. The arrogance in his eyes flickered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then annoyance. He wasn't used to being challenged. He was the big fish in a small, muddy pond, and he'd just been yanked out and dropped on my hot, dry deck. Let me educate you, Sheriff. I began, my voice low and cutting. You see scribbles. I see a contemporaneous record. Do you know what that means? It means she wrote it down as it happened. It wasn't created last week in preparation for a lawsuit. I see a pattern. 22 entries. The first Friday of the month, $250. Liars, sir, are not that disciplined. Their stories are messy, inconsistent. This, I tapped the ledger with a single finger. This has the ring of tedious, miserable truth. I leaned back, my eyes boring into him. Now, let's talk about this community safety fund. A noble-sounding enterprise. I assume being an official program run by the Sheriff's Department, it has a bank account, yes. A charter, records, receipts for the wonderful things you've purchased to keep the community safe. He shifted in his seat, the first sign of discomfort. It's a more informal fund, Your Honor, for discretionary spending. Things like coffee for the volunteers or a small reward for a tip. Informal, I repeated, tasting the word with disgust. You're an officer of the law, a government employee running a cash-only, off-the-books, informal fund. Does that sound right to you? Because it sounds to me like a slush fund. It sounds like a shakedown. I gestured to Miss Gable. You take $250 a month from this woman, that's $3,000 a year, and it goes into a pot for coffee. What kind of coffee are you serving, Sheriff? Is it brewed with gold? The gallery let out a few stifled snickers. I shot them a look, and silence was restored. My focus returned to Brody. Where are the records, sir? Where is the accounting? You took money from citizens in your official capacity. Where did it go? I don't have to answer that. It's a departmental matter, he snapped, his composure finally starting to crack. Excuse me, my voice dropped an octave. You are the defendant in a lawsuit in my courtroom. You absolutely do have to answer that. Or I will draw a negative inference, which means I will assume the answer is the one that makes you look the most guilty. So I'll ask you again, where are the financial statements for this fund? He stared at me, his jaw tight. He was used to being the one asking the questions, the one people were afraid of. The reversal of roles was clearly more than his fragile ego could handle. We don't keep them in that way. In that way, I mimicked him. You mean you don't keep them at all, so you have no proof, not a single shred of paper to show that this money went anywhere other than your own pocket? Is that what you're telling me? This is an attack on my integrity, he blustered, his face turning a blotchy red. Sir, your integrity left the building the moment you decided your badge was a business license. Don't talk to me about integrity. I glanced back at Miss Gable's notes. She mentions a Deputy Miller. He sometimes collected the money, she says. Is that true? Brody hesitated. A trap, and he knew it. If he said yes, he implicated his deputy. If he said no, he risked Miss Gable having proof he was lying. Deputy Miller assists me in all community outreach programs. That wasn't the question. Did Deputy Miller collect cash from Miss Gable? He may have, on occasion, picked up donations. So he's your bagman, I said flatly. Why isn't he here today? If this is a legitimate community outreach program, wouldn't you bring your partner to corroborate your story to present a united front? Or did you tell him to stay home so he couldn't perjure himself? I didn't think it was necessary to disrupt his duties, he said, the excuse sounding lame even to his own ears. I see. You thought it was more important for him to be out on the street, perhaps collecting more donations, than to be here defending the honor of this wonderful program you two are running. My sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. I let him squirm for a moment. He thought his uniform and his title gave him a Teflon coating. I was here to show him that in my courtroom, everyone is just a person with a story, and I'm very, very good at figuring out which stories are pure fiction. I picked up the statement he had submitted in his defense. It was full of self-serving nonsense about his years of service and his dedication to the public. I scanned it quickly, my eyes landing on one sentence. I held the paper up. In your own written testimony, you state, and I quote, "My department works tirelessly to build trust with local business owners, ensuring they feel protected, not preyed upon." I put the paper down and stared at him. Read that sentence again in your head, Sheriff. Then look at Miss Gable. Look at her face. Does she look like a woman who feels protected, or does she look like someone who has been preyed upon by the very man who swore an oath to prevent it? He wouldn't look at her. He just glared at me, his eyes burning with impotent rage. You see, I continued leaning in for the kill. Your problem is you forgot the most important rule. You can't have it both ways. You can't be the protector and the predator. And today, in this room, you have to pick one. He said nothing. It was the only smart move he'd made all day. His silence was a confession, a loud ringing admission of guilt that filled the courtroom. He had no defense. His strategy had been simple: deny, belittle, and intimidate. He assumed his badge and his bluster would be enough. He misjudged his opponent. He misjudged the arena. Most of all, he misjudged me. Let's move on to the health inspector, I said, my tone shifting. Miss Gable claims that the day after she refused to pay you, she was visited by the health department. You call this a coincidence. I call it retaliation. Do you have any idea how many restaurants there are in your county, Sheriff? He blinked. I don't know the exact number. Of course you don't. Let me tell you, there are 142. And yet on that specific day, the inspector chose Miss Gable's diner. The one diner whose owner had just told you to take your donation and shove it. That's not a coincidence. That's a message. That's a threat. That's what mobsters do, not law enforcement. His face tightened. I resent that accusation, Your Honor. Then refute it. I challenged him, my voice rising. Give me something other than your wounded pride. Give me a fact. Give me a piece of evidence. Give me a reason to believe that a man who runs a cash-only, no-records fund and shakes down business owners is somehow above using his position to punish those who don't play his game. He was silent. The well of his arrogance had run dry, leaving only the muddy bottom of his deceit. I turned to Miss Gable. Ma'am, when the health inspector came, what did he say? She wrung her hands. He said he'd received an anonymous tip about a rodent problem. We've never had a rodent problem, Your Honor. Not in 15 years. An anonymous tip, I said, looking directly at Brody. How convenient. Sheriff, does your department ever pass along anonymous tips to other county agencies? It's standard procedure if a public health issue is suspected, he mumbled, reciting from a playbook he no longer believed in himself. So you admit it, I pounced. You made the call. I did not, he yelled, finally losing his cool completely. I said it's procedure. I didn't say I did it. Did it, then, I boomed, the sound sharp and sudden. Did the tip just materialize out of thin air? Did a ghost whisper it into the health inspector's ear? Someone with a grudge against Miss Gable called it in the day after she stood up to you. You expect me to believe that's just another in a long line of unfortunate coincidences that all seem to benefit your wallet. He was breathing heavily, his uniform suddenly looking 2 sizes too small. He was a bully, cornered, stripped of his power, and he didn't know what to do. The smirk was long gone, replaced by a mask of snarling desperation. This is a mockery of justice, he spat. No, sir, I corrected him, my voice dangerously calm again. What you were doing to the people of your town, that was a mockery of justice. This, I swept a hand around the courtroom, this is the reckoning. This is where the nonsense stops. I looked down at the ledger one more time. 22 payments. $250 each. A total of $5,500. She was only suing for $5, 000, the maximum for this court. Miss Gable, I said, my voice softening for the first time, you run a small business. A diner. It's hard work, isn't it? Long hours, small profit margins. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded. Yes, Your Honor, it's all I have. And this man, who swore an oath to protect you, used his power to take a piece of it every month. Not because you'd done anything wrong, but because he could. Because he thought you were weak and scared and that no one would ever listen to you. I paused, then looked back at Brody, my eyes like flint. Well, you were wrong, Sheriff. I'm listening. I folded my hands on the desk. The time for questions was over. The time for a verdict had come. In my courtroom, I deal with facts. Fact 1, Miss Gable has a detailed contemporaneous log of payments made to you. Fact 2, you admit to running an informal fund with no records, no accountability, and no oversight, a classic slush fund. Fact 3, after your victim refused to pay, her business was immediately targeted by a county agency, a coincidence so outrageous it's insulting. Fact 4, you have offered not a single piece of credible evidence to refute her claims, relying instead on arrogance and bluster. I let the facts hang in the air. Each one was a nail in his coffin. You came in here today believing that your uniform would shield you. You believed you were above the law. That is a dangerous and frankly stupid belief. In the United States of America, nobody is above the law. Not a citizen, not a sheriff, not a president. And certainly not you. I leaned forward, my final judgment ready. You didn't just take her money, sir. You abused your power. You betrayed your oath. You corrupted your office. You are a disgrace to the badge you wear. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $5,000. I slammed the gavel down. The sound cracked through the silent room. But I wasn't finished. I looked at him, his face a storm of fury and disbelief. He thought it was over. He was wrong. And one more thing, Sheriff, I said, my voice dripping with ice. I am sending a transcript of this entire proceeding, along with Miss Gable's ledger, to the district attorney's office and to the state attorney general. Your little shakedown operation is over. I have a feeling your next court appearance will be in a criminal court, and you won't be the one wearing the badge. I watched the color drain from his face. The reality of his situation finally crashed down on him. The smug, corrupt sheriff had been publicly, thoroughly, and completely dismantled. We're done here, I said, rising from my chair. As I turned to leave, I saw Miss Gable. She was crying, but this time they were tears of relief. She looked at me and mouthed the words, "Thank you." I gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't about thanks. It was about justice. And on that day in my courtroom, justice had been served. Hot, fast, and with no room for argument, just the way I like it. The walk back to my chambers felt particularly good. The world had one less bully in a position of power. A good day's work. Back in my chambers, I took a sip of cold water. The fire from the Brody case was still burning in my gut. It's a righteous fire, the kind that reminds me why I do this. People think power corrupts. That's not true. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. Brody was always a thug. The badge and the uniform just gave him a bigger stage to play on. He thought the costume made him the character. What a fool. The costume just makes you a bigger target when you step out of line. I buzzed my bailiff. "Bird, come in here." He entered, his expression as stoic as ever, but I could see a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. He'd seen the whole thing. He always does. "You heard my instructions," I said, not bothering with a preamble. "I want a certified copy of that transcript and the ledger on the district attorney's desk by 3 o'clock, not in the mail, hand-delivered. I want a signature. Brody is going to try to get ahead of this, make it look like a disgruntled citizen in a TV court. I want the DA to have the cold, hard facts before Brody can spin his fairy tales." "Already on it," Judge Bird said. "The clerk is preparing it now." Of course he was. He's a professional. "Good," I said. "What's next on the docket of human misery?" He glanced at his clipboard. "Case 244, Peterson versus Riley, roommates." "What's the dispute?" I asked, bracing myself. The whiplash from a case of genuine corruption to petty squabbling can be jarring. Mr. Peterson is suing Miss Riley for $500 for the intentional destruction of his prize-winning bonsai tree. I stared at him. He stared back, his face a perfect mask of neutrality. I let out a short, sharp sigh. A tree. We've gone from extortion by a public official to a murdered houseplant. Fine. Let's get this over with. Send them in. I swept back into the courtroom. The energy had completely changed. The tension was gone, replaced by an air of the absurd. At the plaintiff's table was a young man, maybe 25, with floppy hair and a t-shirt that said Plant Daddy. He looked like he was on the verge of tears. At the defendant's table sat a young woman with bright pink hair and a nose ring, scrolling through her phone with an expression of profound boredom. She didn't even look up when I entered. I sat down hard. Put the phone away, I snapped. Her head shot up, startled. This is a courtroom, not a coffee shop. Show some respect for the process, or I'll find you in contempt. And you can see how good the reception is in a holding cell. She dropped the phone into her purse as if it were radioactive. Good. You Mr. Peterson, I asked Plant Daddy. He nodded, sniffling. You're suing Miss Riley for killing your plant. Is that right? He wasn't a plant, Your Honor, he said, his voice quivering with emotion. He was Bartholomew. A 5-year-old ficus ginseng. He had a soul. I had to physically restrain myself from rolling my eyes into the back of my head. My internal monologue was screaming, a soul. Did he pay taxes? Did he have a driver's license? No. Then he was a shrub in a pot. I'm sure he was very special, sir. I said, my voice devoid of any actual sympathy. But in the eyes of the law, he was property, an item, a plant. Now, what do you claim Miss Riley did to this item? She murdered him. In cold blood, she poured a can of sugary, caffeinated poison all over his roots, he wailed, pointing an accusing finger at the pink-haired girl. She poured a can of mega-gulp soda on him. I looked at Miss Riley. Her boredom had been replaced by a look of utter contempt. Is this true? Did you pour a mega-gulp on Bartholomew the bonsai? First of all, his name wasn't Bartholomew, she said, her voice dripping with scorn. He called it that. The tree didn't have a name. It's a plant. And second, no, I didn't. He's just being dramatic because I told him I was moving out. So the tree just spontaneously died of a sugar overdose, I asked. He probably killed it himself, she shot back. He was obsessed with it, pruning it, watering it with special filtered water. It was creepy. He probably over-pruned it and is trying to blame me so he can get money for my half of the security deposit. I turned back to the plaintiff. Mr. Peterson, you claim she poured soda on your tree. Did you see her do it? No, but I found the can, he said triumphantly. Right next to his pot. Her fingerprints are all over it. I held up a hand. Stop right there. You are not a forensics expert. Don't tell me whose fingerprints are on what. You found an empty soda can. In an apartment you both share. Is that correct? Yes, but it was her favorite flavor, Cherry Blast. Does she drink Cherry Blast soda? Miss Riley, I asked. Yes, sometimes, she admitted. So does half the planet. It doesn't mean I used it as tree poison. This was going nowhere, and my patience was wearing thin. We went from a clear-cut case of abuse of power to a nonsensical dispute based on a discarded soda can. Mr. Peterson, you're asking for $500. How did you arrive at that number? Did you have the tree appraised? He was a show tree, he insisted. I won 3rd place at the local Arboretum Fair 2 years ago. He was priceless to me, but I found a similar one online for $450, and the other $50 is for emotional distress. Emotional distress, I repeated deadpan. For the plant. Yes. I looked at him. I looked at her. 2 people living under the same roof who couldn't stand each other fighting over a dead plant and a security deposit. This was my world. 1 minute I'm staring down a corrupt sheriff. The next, I'm mediating a dispute between a man who humanizes his houseplants and a woman who looks like she fell into a vat of bubblegum. Miss Riley, I said, turning my attention to her, you claim you didn't do it. Where were you on the night of Bartholomew's alleged murder? I was at my friend's place, she said. I stayed over. I have text messages to prove it. Let me see them, I said. Bird retrieved her phone. I looked at the screen. The texts were there, confirming her story. She was at a friend's house from 8 p.m. until the next morning. I looked at Mr. Peterson. When did you discover the crime scene? The next morning when I woke up, he was wilted, and the soil was sticky. I looked back at the phone in my hand. Then I looked at Miss Riley. Something wasn't adding up. The texts say you were at your friend's, but your social media says something different. Her eyes widened in panic. Funny thing about phones, Miss Riley, they tell all sorts of stories. And yours tells me that at 2 a.m., you posted a picture from your bedroom window, a picture of the moon, with the caption, "Can't sleep. He and his stupid tree are driving me crazy." Your friend's house must have a remarkably similar view to your own apartment, doesn't it?